about us.
So listen, man. So how well? What are the benefits package of the feds? Like, how well do they pay you, man? Like, is there like
they don't pay me?
They don't pay you?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm not a federal agent.
Okay.
I am not being paid by anybody. And actually,
why do you think so many people that are trusted don't believe you?
I think it is partly astroturfed. I think because it is so convenient. Because when we do these big things, we are presented to millions of new people because it is a spectacle when we go on march, when we have the drums and the banners and the uniforms and the masks. It is engineered to be something which is spectacular. It is very out of the ordinary, and people watch it. And it's very easy for a lot of conservatives, I believe, not the ones here, but a lot of conservatives to dismiss us by saying that's not real. It's fake.
Welcome back to Posting Through It. I'm Jared.
And I'm Mike.
And I'm Jeff.
We've got a episode this week all about Patriot Front. It's not quite, a full-blown who the hell is episode, but we do have some in the hopper coming later this summer that we're really excited about. Jeff Tischauser is here. He is an academic who researches the white power movement, maybe one of the foremost experts on the white power movement, knows a hell of a lot about Patriot Front, has published a bunch of reporting about them, and he's going to help us understand what this group is about. They tend to get more active in the summer, and on the last episode, we talked about protest movements, and it's possible these guys might show up. So we thought it would be good to kind of walk through what they are, who they are, so people aren't confused.
One of the main reasons to do an episode like this, particularly in the summer season, is that when Patriot Front shows up, it creates a whole mess of confusion for people. You have some MAGA people will kind of talk about them as if they're federal informants. I don't know if they can still do that with Kash Patel running the FBI, but not federal informants, but actually performing feds in order to try to discredit MAGA, right? Something like that. You'll have also a lot of people will treat them as being like a terroristic threat when they show up and they march around and things like that. So I think it's important to kind of like actually scrutinize Patriot Front and look at what they do and who they are.
Before we dive in, a quick reminder, we have a link to our tip jar in the episode description. Throw a few bucks in there if you'd like. It helps us keep going. And after we record this episode, I'm getting on a plane and going to the Alaskan wilderness in search of the next chapter of my life as I re-enter the job market, looking for full-time work and that sort of thing. I'm really looking forward to the trip, but it does mean that next week we're going to be off. We'll be back on July 14th. So let's talk about Patriot Front. Jeff, introduce yourself. I gave you a little ramble there, but who the hell are you?
That's a question that I ask myself every single day. I really don't know. I've been researching the white power movement for about 10 years now. Started with identifying people who were counter-protesting my friends and I. In Madison, Wisconsin, Officer Matt Kenney murdered Tony Robinson, unarmed black man, in March of 2015. Protests ensued, and then people started showing up with long rifles in combat gear, looking like they wanted to go to war against us. And I got with a couple people. We started identifying them. And that's kind of how I got started in this. Started then pursuing some of the academic work. I was in grad school at the time. But funny enough, the people that we originally identified that were counter-protesting us, some of them ended up being involved in the Governor Whitmer kidnapping plot.
Really?
No shit.
Which is just a wild, small world kind of far-right thing that you get into doing the work.
There's another alleged Fed op, right?
These federal agents are busy, man. They're busy. We opened the show with a clip of Thomas Rousseau, who is the leader of Patriot Front denying that the group is a bunch of federal informants or federal stage actors trying to discredit the MAGA movement or whatever. Before we dive in, you've done a lot of reporting, research about the group we're talking about today. Are these feds? Do they glow?
Honestly, some of them are probably feds, right? But are they working for the FBI to infiltrate Patriot Front or to make MAGA look bad? Absolutely not. I say that they're feds because they've all been, a lot of them at least have been arrested and charged with crimes, and who knows who has talked, right?
So to clarify for the audience, just so what you're saying is that like once you've sort of been through the system in some sense, they know your name, they know your number, right? And they can lean on you with the pressure of potentially going to jail.
Exactly.
Yeah, and some of the people that have been arrested, right, have taken plea deals. And, one reason a prosecutor offers a plea deal is so they don't have to go through the hassle of taking you to trial. But they usually come with some conditions, right? And I don't think it would be totally far-fetched to think that it involved, having a little chit-chat with a couple people who might be interested in this group.
I'm just asking questions because it seems like Thomas Rousseau got off with a slap on the wrist for his involvement in Unite the Right. Why?
It's a fair question. So, Jeff, in the scope of the white power movement, where does Patriot Front sit? Why should people care about this group, and what's the risk that they pose?
Where do they situate? Where are they situated in the white power movement? It's a question that I ask myself a lot because on the surface, Patriot Front seems almost like a conservative group, right? I mean, they dress themselves in like Americana garb. They use red, white, and blue, right? They don't use symbols of hatred that we all know. The rhetoric is fairly tame. However, once you get into their online spaces and their private spaces, once they're among themselves, they show themselves to be, just as rabidly white supremacist as any accelerationist neo-Nazi group that I come across. So, where is it situated? It's almost like I perceive it as along the start. Is it the start of the pipeline to radicalization? Not necessarily, but it is closer to the start of radicalization than not, right? So it is a group that captures a lot of attention in the larger far right, and they recruit mainly from people who are already kind of, so-called red-pilled. And then once they get in Patriot Front, they get a little bit more radicalized to white nationalism, among themselves. They're reading, some neo-Nazi literature. And then a lot of them start realizing, hey, holy cow, I'm actually in a cult of Thomas Rousseau, right? And so they leave and then they go join like an accelerationist group or something more radical.
I don't think everybody in our listener base necessarily knows what you mean by accelerationist group.
Okay.
So what you're talking about are like sort of like cells that sort of people who kind of speak to one another on Telegram, right? Like that's right. That's sort of what it is. And by accelerationist, the idea is, I know this is getting a little heady, guys, but like the idea, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you take drastic actions like terrorism, things of that nature, you can potentially destabilize society and open up new possibilities for fascism. Is that sort of what you mean by an accelerationist group?
Yes, it is. So, I mean, Patriot Front members, what are they doing? They're posting stickers. They're doing banner drops, full of their messaging and going to rallies with the group. And that gets stale for a lot of them. Looking in some of their internal communication, talking to a couple of former members, it's just gets boring after a while. So Patriot Front is like an incubator in a way for more radical action that they take once they leave the group. Because again, one of the biggest criticisms that I've heard from people in the movement, and you can see on Telegram from people who compete with Patriot Front for membership, it's a cult around Thomas Rousseau. Like I cannot emphasize how big of just a cult of personality. If you go against Thomas, you are shunned, right? If you speak out and try to assert yourself and your idea, if Thomas doesn't like it, that could go very wrong for you. socially within the group.
If that's the case, then we need to talk about who Thomas Rousseau is, because we're kind of going into this backwards. So Thomas Rousseau is the founder of Patriot Front, right? And so the first time we kind of see like the sort of origins of this group kind of come in 2017 at the Unite the Right rally, right? But he does not come to that event. How old is he then when he goes to the event?
He was 16 years old, a junior in high school at Unite the Right.
Well, I mean, that had to put him among like one of the youngest people at Unite the Right, right?
Yeah, Thomas Rousseau talks about getting visited by the FBI at high school after Unite the Right.
So you said before we went on it that he's from Texas, and he's kind of like, blonde hair, blue eyed guy. How would you describe him? I know I've seen him a lot in this sort of like cowboy hat type thing he wears these days. That looks which in my opinion looks quite fatuous, but no offense, Thomas. But what kind of kid showed up at Unite the Right?
In high school, Thomas was a journalist with his high school newspaper. He appeared to, he writes favorably about Barack Obama and inclusive democracy in a couple articles back then. So, I mean, that is an interesting question. So simultaneously as he is doing this work for a school newspaper, he's on this old fascist forum called Iron March. So there's which Thomas Rousseau like comes out of high school or goes to Unite the Right. Something happened between him, getting started with this journalism interest and then just quickly falling into the Iron March crowd. So who shows up at Unite the Right is this little fascist kid who is part of a group called Vanguard America. And Vanguard America primarily is recruiting folks from the military, either currently, active duty military or people with military experience. And much of Vanguard America is in their 20s or 30s. So what is going on with Vanguard America hanging out, and not even just hanging out with Thomas Rousseau is in high school as a high schooler. Like Thomas Rousseau for Vanguard America was like in the upper crust of the organization, right? He was part of the logistics team going into Unite the Right for the group.
And in their capacity as a group there's these guys are wearing like black and white uniforms. There's a lot of different groups that wore black and white actually, right? Or at least a few. It was like Traditionalist Worker Party or whatever. But they're like when you see images of it in retrospect, there were different people like carrying shields. That's kind of like what unified them. They just went with their shields and marched and got into conflict with anti-fascists.
Yeah, and if you've heard the name Vanguard America before this podcast, Vanguard America got news coverage around Unite the Right for the old heads listening because a man named James Field, who toward the end of the day in Charlottesville, got in his vehicle and did a car attack against a crowd of anti-fascists, murdering Heather Heyer, marched with Vanguard America.
Fields was also young, by the way. I mean, he was what, a tick above high school, right? He was like 20 years old or something.
Yeah.
And he wasn't just marching with Vanguard America. He was marching right next to Thomas Rousseau.
After Charlottesville, in the hours, days, weeks that followed, a just huge wave of scrutiny starts to come down on the white power movement. Legal scrutiny, political scrutiny, and groups that were involved in Unite the Right are really feeling the pressure. About 2 weeks later, Thomas Rousseau announced that Vanguard America was rebranding, and it's called Patriot Front.
Covering Patriot Front taxes the hell out of me, and that's why, quite frankly, I like using Magic Mind.
That's right, folks. Posting through it has reached a milestone that every podcast strives for. We've partnered with a company called Magic Mind, and the show now has its own brain juice to endorse.
You're bearing the lead here. Plenty of podcasts talk about products that claim to support your brain, better focus, more energy, less stress. A lot of our listeners have heard that before. We actually tried this one and found it to be a legit product.
If I can be totally honest here, when I got that first email from Magic Mind, I thought it might be one of those companies you see online, that acts like they sell low-grade psychedelic mushrooms. Do you get those ads, or am I like narking on myself right now?
That's a no comment from me.
Anyway, I thought it was one of those companies. I thought, yeah, hell yeah, we've got to do it. I think that's like what my first text to you said. Then I learned they make mental performance shots. And I said, okay, so that's how they sell you the drugs.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there before you get us in trouble. What Magic Mind actually sells are daily mental performance shots. In each 2-ounce bottle, you'll get a dose of 12 ingredients proven to boost neural function. Adaptogens to help with stress, L-theanine and nootropics to support clearer thinking, full daily dose of vitamins B, C, and D. The ingredients are nano-encapsulated, a process that makes it easier for your body to absorb the vitamins and nutrients you're paying for. That's all to say, there's some science behind Magic Mind, and over time, you'll notice a positive difference.
Let me just say straight up, I was pretty skeptical of this stuff, but they told us we could try it before we agreed to work with them. I drank one every day for 7 days, and by the end of the week, I was sold. So was Mike. And when we ran out of the first samples, I asked him to send us some more.
So what was it that did it for you? I think we both expected it might be junk.
Yeah. I mean, I've struggled with focus at work and stuff for a while. It always seemed like it would come to me in these little windows, and I would drink tons of coffee, energy drinks, whatever was around. And I would basically try to brute force my brain into like a better focused state. It ended up working out enough. I was still productive, but I'd get jittery and anxious. And by the end of the day, I just felt really worn down. I mean, I was getting my stuff done, but I was really putting my body through a lot.
I think a lot of people do exactly what you're describing.
Yeah, so I tried the Magic Mind stuff, and to be clear, I'm expecting pretty much nothing from it at this point. First day feels pretty decent, but after a week or so, and this is going to sound like total bullshit, but I swear to God it's true, my caffeine intake has plummeted.
For real?
I'm not kidding. Like, I drink 1 cup of coffee in the morning now, and sometimes I don't even finish that. And Magic Mind has some caffeine, and because of that nano encapsulation thing, it releases over the course of a few hours. And that's some nice energy. It means there's not a really hard crash. I don't know about the nootropics or adaptogens or the science of that stuff, but I do know that I don't miss feeling like I have to drink 5 cups of coffee every day just to keep my shit together. And that is what sold me. That was like a real effect on my daily life.
There are all kinds of scammy and sketchy supplements and products that claim to do what Magic Mind does, but Magic Mind is the real deal. We both tried it, going on a few weeks now, and legitimately recommend giving it a shot. Magic Mind is going to make it easy for you too. You can get 50% off of your first subscription when you use the code THROUGHIT50. That's THROUGHIT50 on magicmind.com. We put that in the episode description for you to find later. And if you don't like it for whatever reason, there's a 100-day money-back guarantee, no questions asked. It doesn't even matter if you drank it all. There's no risk. So why not give it a try?
Oh, my God.
Hey.
Jesus, was that our first ad?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, it's time to...
Let's get back to Patriot Front.
Yeah, seriously.
So, Jeff, can you explain sort of the context here? I mean, obvious to me, this was like an obvious play of like, okay, this brand is ruined. Some guy who was marching with us just murdered somebody. We've got to change it up. But Thomas Rousseau, he was in the upper echelons of Vanguard America, but not like the ultimate point person. So how did he become the guy that decided that the group's rebranding?
That's a great question that a lot of former Vanguard American members would love to know a little bit more detail about. From what I've learned, Rousseau, so there was like a middle point, a very quick middle point between Vanguard America and Patriot Front, and it's called Southern Front. Southern Front was a Discord server that many of the Vanguard American guys would communicate on. There was another server, but I'm blanking on its name. So basically, you put those two Discord servers together, and that's all of Vanguard America. And the Southern Front one, Rousseau was an administrator of it, apparently. And he basically does a coup, from what I understand. He strips everyone else with administrator access to the Southern Front Discord. He just revokes their administrative privileges, and then he starts controlling it. And he starts really demanding people fall in line with his ideas. And if you don't get in line, then you're out. And that's then kind of quickly morphs into him branding Southern Front into Patriot Front. There is on this kind of why is he so, pushy about getting people, who he was once comrades with out of the group? Well, his big innovation is to abandon the so-called big tent approach to the white power movement that was being tried at the time. That's
what's that mean?
Tenor of the white power movement at the time, like 2016, 2017, early 2017, is that they're riding high. They're victorious. Trump's in office. There are guys there. They might have some problems with him, but, he's moving the rhetoric forward, that he's got some favorable policies. He hasn't, necessarily abandoned them, in their minds, abandoned them at that point. So you see just a ton of street activity within the white power movement across the United States in the summer of 2016, the summer of 2017. And it really is showing members of the white power movement that, hey, we got the juice. We have all this activity going around the country. We have our guy in the White House. We need to build coalition, basically. And they start thinking of how can we just create a large presence, a larger white power movement by combining all our forces. And they learned pretty severely at Unite the Right that when you combine a bunch of neo-Nazis and white nationalists together who have, just violent intent and that these violent ideologies, it's going to turn out bad. It's going to turn out in a way that's going to leave your movement as a whole, but particularly the groups within it, badly damaged, reputationally, facing legal liability, the stuff that you talked about, the media scrutiny. So it's within that context that building of the big tent to get to the Unite the Right, to really represent this big tent of the of the far right at this event, it showed Rousseau that approach is the wrong choice because it leads to so much negative attention. And that's really his big kind of takeaway, and one of the big reasons why he breaks off this Southern Front Discord server from the rest of Vanguard and then renames it and then kicks everybody out of Vanguard who don't agree with, hey, it's time to end the Big Ten approach. We need to focus on building really a vanguard of white power activists.
You had mentioned earlier on in the podcast, the kind of Americana stuff that they brand themselves in, and we kind of moved through it quickly, but it always struck me as being a conscious choice to try to look like patriotic Republican.
You know what they look like to me? My first job was working at a Walmart, and we also wore navy shirts and khaki pants. That was what we were required to wear. So every time I see them, I just think shit, was I supposed to work today?
These guys from the Best Buy are pissed.
I envision them as kind of Cracker Barrel racists. I don't know. It's they got the kitsch, they got the Americana of that.
Well, there were, but I think it's important to just kind of underscore that the khakis, the polo shirts, the only thing they stick with the masks where they wear masks all the time. And that's why everybody calls them feds and stuff like that. And that doesn't look normal. Yeah. I mean, that look strikes me as being a deliberate attempt to try to recruit conservative men, right? People who lean conservative and they see a conflict on the street between guys dressed like that and Antifa, and they're like, these are my guys. They look like they watch Fox News.
The symbols that Patriot Front use are, this is Rousseau's very careful branding of this group. He has spent a lot of his adult life trying to think through, how can I appeal to normie conservatives? And he has so far seemingly failed, because all the normie conservatives tend to think Patriot Front are a bunch of feds, which is funny in a way. But it also says a lot about how, white supremacy is kind of normalized on the right, and how they can't really get around it, and they just kind of lie about it. But the symbols that they use that I think really speak to how they try to appeal to normie conservatives who, they're folks who just love our country, right? And they're patriots in some very negative, but, honestly, you could be a patriot and still be, an all right person, I suppose. But to get to my point, is they use this of what's called the Betsy Ross flag. And you'll see this at every rally. It's the It's a flag that was developed in 1777. It has 13 stars in a circle to signify the 13 colonies. And for for Thomas Rousseau and for members of Patriot Front, this is the most authentic way to express your white American identity, because by the time the United States flag got popularized for them, for Patriot Front, the country was already controlled by Jewish people, right? So the American flag to members of Patriot Front is something to look down upon because it symbolizes, this degenerate Jewish power structure that's trying to control and terrorize white people. So
and they also use the upside down American flag,
right?
Which we saw a lot after January 6th. Anyway,
they also fly their own flag, Patriot Front's flag, red, white, and blue. And if you don't look at it carefully, you just kind of think, oh, it's just a patriotic flag. But there's I always have trouble pronouncing this word, but it's a fasciste. It's
the sticks, right?
It's a bundle of wood, or basically an axe. Sometimes it's an axe, and it's wrapped in barbed wire. It's a symbol that was popularized by Italian fascists under Mussolini in the early 20th century, and it's supposedly what it means to these guys is revolution through tradition, which is a misnomer, and I don't understand how they get there. I mean, I can understand it, but rationally, I cannot. I can understand it at an emotional level, right? Like I get that, but revolution through tradition. I mean, that's one of Patriot Front's slogans as well.
It's like people that are like, I'm radically conservative, and it's like, what?
Right.
I just keep going back and thinking that like at the time this group is coming together, Rousseau is still in high school, right? Like the Patriot Front is coming together. It's whipping out its branding. It is kind of setting out a strategy, and it's being run by a child. Just something to think about. So let's go on then and talk about what Patriot Front gets up to. In their first year of existing, there is a few standout events. In September 2017, Patriot Front holds its first event. So within a month, they're out on the street. They go to a anarchist book fair in Houston, and there's about 15 people there, a couple dozen people there. They've got that outfit on, khaki pants, navy shirt, and they hold banners, they chant, and they yell at attendees. What is sort of your takeaway of this first showing? What do you make of it?
I think the biggest thing for me is the timing of it. It's only about a month after Charlottesville, right? I think it's September 2017. And it's very much a crash course in Rousseau's management, right? Or Rousseau's big innovation of moving away from the Big Ten approach to coalition building in the white power movement. It's him with his trusted comrades, his trusted people, and he was able to, get them out and shout down, and yell and heckle and mock attendees of this anarchist book fair. And it, I think, kind of solidifies in Rousseau's mind that this is the right approach. Like, look, this is starting off on a good foot. I got 15 people with me, and we're wreaking havoc against our political enemies.
Asmodor was with them, if I'm not mistaken, and it was like 15 really young guys, and this guy who's basically looks like a racist Santa Claus, who was a blogger for the Daily Stormer, a neo-Nazi website, who was in and out of prison a whole bunch. Was it Robert Warren Ray? Is that his name? Is that his name? Something like that. But he died recently, and I just had to mention that it was very weird. I remember thinking how weird it was that you had all these extremely young guys and like a teen leader, and then this old predatory-looking white supremacist with them. And Kid O'Connell was there on the other side. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a journalist based out of Texas, and he was he's into queer rights and disability rights and stuff like that. And he was kind of like part of the back and forth there.
So they must have thought something worked, because in the following months, they would continue demonstrations. In November, they did their first event at a college campus. It was on the South Mall of the University of Texas at Austin. About 25 people participated there. And in January 2018, Patriot Front attended a anti-abortion rally in Chicago. Jeff, you live in Chicago, right?
I do.
Yeah.
It is a wonderful place.
That's our backyard right there. So this anti-abortion rally, it's like the March for Life in Chicago, right? They keep going back to this. This may come up a couple more times, but they have claimed, Rousseau has claimed, that they get warm reception at these anti-abortion events. So tuck that in the back of your head. July 18 comes along. Patriot Front members attack a San Antonio ICE protest camp. Jeff, is this the first case where this group has, had a physical altercation or like physical aggression towards people they perceive as their political opponents?
From what I understand, yes. This would be the first time that their members, Patriot Front members, were seen aggressively kind of shoving, someone call it assaulting, members of their political opposition. However, even at the anarchist book fair, though, you kind of see they were separated, but there was a lot of just there's images of Rousseau from this anarchist book fair. Just kind of you see him foaming at the mouth almost. So that anger was there with Rousseau and with some other people at the anarchist book fair, but it wasn't really until July of 2018 that we see that kind of turn into physical contact.
So the next thing, and I should have said earlier, I'm working off a timeline of Patriot Front that you put together. So this isn't all coming out of my noggin, listeners. This is a lot of hard work by Jeff. August 2018, on this timeline you put together, Jacob Zach. What a fucked up spelling. I'm just looking at the name here. Jakub Zak. This is like a gamer tag on Xbox Live. So anyway, this guy, he's charged with a weapons violation in Illinois. They found him in possession of 5 guns without a license. He pleaded guilty, sentenced to 18 months probation. So a year after Unite the Right, we've got Patriot Front, doing these demonstrations. They're seen being physically aggressive, and we've got a member arrested on gun charges. That is the first year of Patriot Front. So a few questions to kind of zoom out. Besides Thomas Rousseau, who is involved in Patriot Front at this point? We know it's split off of Vanguard America, and like Discord servers are involved, but like, what does the group look like at this point? I mean, Patriot Front members are generally on the younger side, right? I mean, like, what, besides maybe Asmodor, lording over the anarchist book fair protest, what is this group like at this point, a year in?
There are some older men within the group at this point. One of them being, he goes by Braxton Bragg or Nick Texas in the movement, in the group, Joseph Nicholas Brown. And from what I understand, he's a holdover from Vanguard. And my hunch, it's hard to verify this without talking to him, and he doesn't ever want to talk. It's like Joseph Brown is this older man. He's got a fairly long life in the movement until, then he meets Thomas Rousseau. He moves over with Thomas Rousseau. He seems to be like a kind of a mentor figure at this moment in the organization, as well as this man, Billy Merce. He doesn't use an alias. I don't think he's ever used an alias, but he's a long-time Patriot Front member. And I also think he's a holdover from Vanguard America. And he's also older. He's probably 15, maybe 20 years older than Thomas Rousseau. It's mainly young men, mainly 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. But there are some guys in their late 30s, mid 30s.
So around this summer of 2018 time, I actually had personal encounters with members of Patriot Front.
Like Craigslist personal encounter, or like
No, I did not have sex with anyone in Patriot Front that summer. Yeah, I was, when I was on two things, I'm trying to figure out which one to tell first. The first one I'll talk about, you mentioned Braxton Bragg, that guy, what was his name again?
Joseph Brown.
Joseph Brown, that fucking guy. Okay, so when I was on Gab, I was on, for people who don't know what Gab is, it was just like a white supremacist version of Twitter. It was very big in 2018. It's useless now in the age of X because they're all there. But, a lot of these guys were coming for me, right? This is, and the tone on that site was really vicious. This is like before, like a few months later, you had the terror attack in Pittsburgh. At the synagogue, which was Gab related, and that sort of changed the dynamic of Gab after that. But before that, it was just like people with swastikas in their eyes or whatever. And that guy doxed my sister, or tried to, and wrote this, or like, an account that only he followed did. Let's put it that way. Not very subtle. Or that only followed him, or whatever. And it was like, yours, his sister is this, she likes to take whatever. I don't want to get too obscene, but it's like racist and, very misogynistic and, pornographic too, especially for a so-called conservative person. Anyway, they got the docs wrong. But the other thing that happened was my parents received a card in the mail that said Patriot Front on one side. And on the back of it, it said patriotism with teeth. And that was a problem because I was getting a lot of threats back then, and like everything I got was like was just like, it was just like compounding. Like, I mean, you know what you're like when you're in that space. It's just like, seems like everything makes you feel more and more fucking scared, because it's just like, because whatever. Now that I look back on it, what they were doing there is they were picking reporters who covered the far right, and they were trying to like boost their rep and trying to get people, I think two separate things. The doxing of my sister was because they hated me, this guy or whatever. But the stuff about the card, yeah, they want to scare me, but also they want me to post about it on Twitter, boost their rep. It's like easy activism. And I just wanted to interject that personal story because they were very much a part of my life in 2018.
Yeah, I also got some Patriot Front mail. I got the most mail from Alex Jones listeners. I'll tell those stories on the show someday. But it was not fun, is what I will say about it.
Yeah, because patriotism with teeth is like not a threat. But it could be. It could be, right?
I had a Patriot Front associate, he's not really a member. Brad Lewis, he palled around with, Sean Kaufman and the Tennessee Active Club, which, according to one of my most recent articles, we learned that this particular active club, as well as dozens of others, are secretly being controlled by Patriot Front. And so, is Brad Lewis a Patriot Front member? Oh, he's an associate. Nonetheless, I'm trying to say that this man, have you ever had a Nazi write a poem about you? This guy has written 4 poems about me and posted it on Telegram. His wife has written a song about me.
That's so sweet.
I'd like to critique those from a literary standpoint. Yeah,
we can boot up like a bootleg Pitchfork here and listen to some of this music together.
It's horrible.
Last question before we move on. Patriot Front, after their first year, is going to start getting really active. So we're going to be moving pretty quick through these next few years of Patriot Front. But before we do, Jeff, just question for you. What do you know about the reception to Patriot Front in the first year among their, I guess they would call them comrades in the white power movement?
My take at the time was Patriot Front was seen as something innovative and new among white power activists, even though the tactics and really some of the rhetorical strategy that Patriot Front was deploying at the time, it's really not new. I mean, people were trying to be implicitly white supremacist or coded white supremacists in the white power movement for a long time. I mean, look at David Duke, right? So it was new in the sense that, in 2018, 2017, 2016, the alt-right that you mentioned, it was such an online phenomena. And then Patriot Front comes in, a couple other groups come in and is like, they're avoiding this Big Ten approach and say, hey guys, let's create our small groups, our small kind of cell-like structure, and let's get out in the street and do so-called activism. And by that, they mean, post-racist propaganda, do banner drops, hold rallies. They start destroying murals and works of public art that represent or celebrate Black history, victims of police violence, migrant cultures. So there seems to be an excitement for Patriot Front because they're out there on the street, pushing the message forward. That was my take at the time.
So let's hit the gas because, like I said, things start getting busy for Patriot Front. 2019 comes along. You got another visit to that Chicago anti-abortion rally. February that year, Boston police arrest 3 Patriot Front members after observing them placing Patriot Front propaganda on city property. One of the guys allegedly slapped the arresting officer on the hand and caught a charge for that. Larson Hood get a dangerous weapon charge, a pocket knife, and a pair of brass knuckles. June that year, another Patriot Front member is charged with a bias-motivated crime after he harassed and intimidated families at a local bookstore hosting a drag queen story hour. These anti-LGBTQ protests start to become quite a theme for Patriot Front demonstrations. July 2019, Thomas Rousseau was deposed in Sines versus Kessler, which is one of the big lawsuits that came out of Unite the Right. I'll stop there, Jeff. He's deposed. He's not named in the lawsuit, right? It's like against groups, or I'm less familiar with that.
How did he? I guess the question with why isn't Thomas Rousseau named as someone to be sued in this lawsuit? What did he give up, maybe, or how helpful was he to the Sines part of the case? But at this deposition, something that sticks out, and it's in this timeline that I published, is the lawyer for the plaintiffs is asking Rousseau to read some of the things that Rousseau himself posted to this Discord server, and it's anti-Semitic slurs, racial slurs. And Rousseau is like, I can't say that. I'm not like this anymore. It hurts my stomach to say these things. So I think it's kind of indicative of, Rousseau seeing that the language is part of the problem, and he understands that he can't be an explicit white supremacist without any consequence. And it serves a lot. There's some humor in it with just kind of how he says like these weird kid things like, gosh darn it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These very,
he still does that.
He's a child. He's only like 18 at the time. And he's being pressed by this lawyer to say things that he's written online, but Thomas won't say in public, or not in public, I'm sorry, in a room of in this deposition.
To be fair, I don't think I would want to repeat that stuff either in front of a bunch of lawyers. So let's skip ahead. That summer, they do another rally at an anarchist book fair. About 20 people participate. Something interesting happens in November 2019. Patriot Front members traveled to Europe to network with violent neo-fascist groups. So they're getting on a plane and flying to where? Poland, right?
They go to a couple places this trip. And since then, I believe, at least from what we know, they've been on at least 2 more. And they seem to have stopped at the same places each time. This one in 2019, they stopped in Italy. And what the fascist group there, it's in the article.
Forza Nuova is what this timeline says.
Yes. And then they stopped in Poland. Actually, I don't know the exact timeline of that trip. I don't know where they stopped first off the top of my head. But I know they went to Italy. They went to Poland. They met Nordic resistance people in Denmark. One of the Nordic countries. I want to say it's Denmark.
Sweden?
It might be. I think it's Sweden. But they might have converged together in Copenhagen. I think that's what happened. But they met with Nordic resistance people either in Sweden or in Denmark during this trip. And then in Spain as well, they meet with Casa Pound people. Casa Pound is a fascist group, like the most traditional, like when we say fascist, what does that really mean? Look at Casa Pound. Those are like Franco Spanish fascists, right? Like, I mean, they're very much military, like kind of fetishizing the military.
Very much like literal sense of the word kind of groups.
Yes.
What does that tell you? I mean, the white power movement has always had, international aspirations, but what's that signal to you that Patriot Front members are, I guess, presumably with some money, whether it's their personal money, membership dues, or whatever, buying these plane tickets to go hobnob in Europe?
Looking at why they were there, and we know why they were there because of leaked documents that were obtained, or documents that were leaked to journalists from anti-fascist infiltrators who infiltrated Patriot Front and obtained these documents. And some of those documents included logistic kind of memos and other kind of prep agendas and whatnot for this trip. And why they were there, they wanted to learn from these groups. They wanted to try to understand how these groups in Europe who are under tighter speech laws. So these groups in Europe can't say certain things because of how laws work, right? You can't deny the Holocaust in many countries over there, for example. So it was a way for them to kind of learn how to become better implicit white supremacists, right? What do they need to brand themselves as, like in appearance, in messaging, stylistically, just across the board. And they learn from these groups who are also tied to this hooligan movement. I don't know much about it, but a lot of the groups that they met in Europe are tied to this hooligan culture. And they're also learning how to defend themselves and how to aggressively fight people in the street, just like these hooligans do in Europe. So they went there to train. They went there to learn how to, message better. They went there to network. They went there to build their international movement of white nationalists.
This was like also a thing around that time too. They were always trying to, it's almost like, these anti-globalists or whatever, they're all still at the same time have this trying to network, right? Steve Bannon, probably not on the level of these guys, still a little bit more tethered to, is he really? I don't know, actually. But still a little bit more tethered to the actual mainstream Republican Party for sure. He was always trying to build these inroads with other, right-wingers in other countries who have a kind of hard right point of view. And yeah, the same thing is true of some of these groups. Iron March, which you mentioned earlier, brought together a bunch of different accelerationist groups from different countries.
So I
want to shout out Claire Goforth for doing the reporting that, we know this because of her reporting. So thank you, Claire.
We're fans of Claire on this show.
We need to have her on, actually.
We do. She would be a great guest. So we walked through some of these events in the early years, just to kind of illustrate a point. And I think all of them in their own way, even though it's, we've spent some time on them here, really illustrate that Thomas Rousseau from the founding and in those early years has these really big, almost larger than life expectations for what he hopes to accomplish with Patriot Front and the strategy that he has, kind of cooked up, the branding that he has cooked up, the people that he is networking, all of it support this vision that he has for a, soft to the touch white power group. Years going forward, I am just going to speed through it because, like I've said a couple times now, they get very active. There's doing flash rallies at places like pharmaceutical companies. They're doing rallies in DC, a rally outside the Alamo. That one was one of the funnier ones, I thought. They are destroying memorials, destroyed a memorial in Orlando, Florida for the victims of the 2016 Pulse nightclub mass shooting, which I found particularly disgusting. They are in places like Chicago. August 2020, skipping ahead quite a bit here, a few leaders of the group are arrested. And this, I think, right, is the first time Thomas Rousseau actually gets a pair of cuffs around his wrists, right?
From what I understand, yes.
Also in that group, Graham Whiston and Cameron Pruitt. Who are those guys? They're just like leadership?
They are leaders within Patriot Front. They are part of Thomas's inner circle, longtime Patriot Front members. Graham also pals around with Media to Rise, as well as Will to Rise, which are groups created by, I know this is going to be a can of worms here, but Robert Rundo. I don't know if we want to talk about Rundo right now, but he's got two groups and they cross over a lot with, he's got a couple groups.
He's another Charlottesville guy who is very much on the street fighting, side of things, right?
Right.
That's a simple way to do it.
And basically, Graham works for his propaganda outlet, Robert Rundo's propaganda outlet called Media to Rise. Graham works very closely with that, as well as Will to Rise, which is Robert Rundo's clothing brand. And Graham, and we learned all of this from the work of anti-fascist infiltrators who gained a bunch of documents and then leaked it to journalists. So we know that Graham has his name on a banking document for Will to Rise, which is this online clothing store, and they sell like other merchandise like sunglasses and just like kind of random items. But in this banking document, Graham writes that the expected revenue, and I'm sure, how do you verify this? But the expected revenue, they said, was $10,000 a month.
I wish I made that.
I mean, I'm sure that's, I guess you could lie on that. It's not like legal, I don't think. He's just setting up a business account for a bank and talking about what's your expected net revenue. But still, to claim that, I think, says enough. And then Cameron Pruitt is an interesting guy as well. He's from Utah. Cameron has a private, he at least at one point had a private private investigator license, and he has done work with security firms. So he is on the surface a dangerous guy, but then when you look at him, you see he doesn't really have a soul. But Cameron's a long time Patriot Front guy. Big, like when I talk to people who have left Patriot Front, which is just a handful, but I've talked to them, Graham and Cameron come up a lot as like Thomas's yes men.
So they get apprehended after two police officers saw them posting Patriot Front propaganda near a courthouse. So, that's not a very serious crime, right? I imagine, they get sort of slapped on the wrist there and go on their way. They do another rally at the National Mall in December 2020. There's about 100 people at that. And I think so this is like the end of the Trump years, right? That's kind of where we are on the timeline.
End of the first Trump administration, not the end of the Trump years.
End of the first Trump years. So, they are rocking and rolling during Trump 1. They're getting bolder. People are getting arrested, but they just keep going. But something that sticks out to me here is that they're not really engaging directly in electoral politics. Like that sort of alt-right era of the white nationalist movement really glued itself to Trump. They really just like stapled themselves to the coattails and try to see how far they could run it. I'm sure all of these guys voted for Trump, right? I mean, I don't think there were any, Joe Biden voters or Hillary Clinton supporters in Patriot Front. But they're not really it doesn't seem like they are making a whole lot of effort to associate themselves with his 2020 campaign. I will say the exception to this is that there have been a few Trump rallies where they have gone to hand out flyers and propaganda. But these flyers aren't like, if you love Trump, join Patriot Front. It's just like, quick story time. I went to go cover a Trump rally one time and I missed the cutoff to get let in as media. So I was like kind of stuck outside with all the people who also couldn't get in. And I was like, well, fuck, man, how am I going to get my story? Like, what am I going to file tonight? And then some guy literally walks up and hands me a Patriot Front flyer and like puts it in my hand. And I look at it and I go, wait a second. And I jump out of the line I'm in and try to chase him down. But so that's the exception there. They've been seen at some Trump rallies. but they're not really engaged in the electoral side of things. But how much of that is like a conscious decision, and how much of it is just, I don't know. I guess my question for you, Jeff, is just why? Why? Is there a reason for that?
I think it is a conscious decision to go there and try to recruit, right? They see MAGA as a whole, like the MAGA movement, as a part of their recruiting grounds. And they see, these folks who are going to Trump rallies as almost red-pilled. Some of them, might be red-pilled. And red-pilled, comes from the movie The Matrix. And it's like, the choice that Morpheus gives Neo is the red pill or the blue pill. The blue pill brings you back to your fantasy land. The red pill is how you see the truth, right? So Patriot Front in their private communication will talk about some of the strategy here. And they will mention that, these MAGA guys, they're so close to our side. If we could just turn them. And so that pushes them to get out into those spaces to try to, talk to them and pass out their literature. But, in terms of electoral politics and even Trump, Patriot Front as a whole, their members, but I would also expand this to a lot of groups within the white power movement. They look at Trump with suspicion, right? They see him, sure, as kind of like a useful idiot. He's helping mainstream some of their preferred policies, or even implementing some of their preferred policies now. And definitely like pushing their rhetoric forward. They see him as just a guy doing that work. However, they also see, him rallying around Israel. And they also see him part of the so-called Zionist occupied government, which is this long-term slogan of the white power movement. And that's how they'll put it in these private communications. So it's a complicated relationship though. And it is worthy of real in-depth analysis. I mean, my take is that Patriot Front needs MAGA, but MAGA doesn't need Patriot Front. And you see that, right? I mean, you see that in a campaign rally. I think it was in North Carolina in September 2024, where you have at a Trump campaign rally, people behind Trump while he's speaking are holding signs that say "Reclaim America." And that's been Patriot Front's slogan since its infancy. Reclaim America. That's what they want. So you have, there's many people smarter than me writing about kind of the 4chanification of the GOP, or the, how these young staffers are really just kind of getting molded by this far-right internet culture. But so you have MAGA's people kind of stealing a little bit, or maybe even like, I guess stealing's a good word, reappropriating, I was maybe going to say, but they're stealing from Patriot Front's kind of way to do white supremacy, and in a very implicit way. So MAGA will take from Patriot Front, and it makes them upset because they want to get the credit, right? They want to get on stage, and MAGA is just not having any of that. They'll take their ideas, they'll take their policies, they'll take their slogans, but they won't take Patriot Front as people.
And at this point, as the first Trump era is coming to an end, how is the group growing? Because it is getting larger here. It is, if you're just counting numbers of flyers and stuff, if you count like putting a propaganda sticker somewhere as white supremacist activity, then Patriot Front is like by far, miles further than like any other white supremacist or like white power movement group in the country right now. Just in terms of like how much they do. A lot of it is stickers and stencils and spray paint, but that takes people, right? And also, how are they organized at this point? Because I know Patriot Front has kind of an interesting way of running its hierarchy, right? It's like kind of like a network of groups.
Okay. I'll start with talking about like, are they growing, or were they growing back in, the end of the first Trump administration? Something of note about like their propaganda production. It's an easy, low effort way to do white supremacist activism, right? It's two knuckleheads in a car with a lot of time can knock out hundreds, if not thousands, of racist flyers across a metro region or rural area. And Patriot Front actually requires its members to, there's a quota system within Patriot Front. Each member is supposed to
fulfill. There's quotas?
Yeah. So Thomas Rousseau, for a very long time, has
Let's get him back to the Best Buy thing.
So he's demanding his members, post a certain amount of racist propaganda per month. If you don't get those numbers, you're punished in a way, or you have to do basically shamed, from what I've heard. It's to do that, to get to their quota. Some members are told to drive sometimes 50 to 100 miles outside of where they live to do these runs, because Patriot Front not only wants you to do the production and to post them, but they want the public to think that they're bigger than they are. So they'll tell members to drive out and just post material in as many places as you can. Does it show growth? Yeah, I guess in a way. You could see kind of the spread of their propaganda across the United States. In terms of growth in numbers of people doing it, it's harder to tell. The organization, and Thomas actually was speaking about this in some interviews he gave to far-right media at the time. He was trying to build a vanguard. He only wanted a couple hundred people that he can trust to kind of build his little, Patriot Front national group to then kind of control the white power movement and influence the white power movement and help create, to move the Overton window a little further. His real goal for a long time has been recruiting from the conservative movement. So to turn he puts it like this: he wants to turn conservatives into nationalists, then he wants to turn nationalists into activists. And that comes with a lot of problems in terms of how to grow. And he does speak fairly openly about some of the struggles that his organization has had in trying to grow bigger than a couple hundred. But then he's like, actually, that's my goal. So it's kind of a little two-sided there. But it's a group that probably at its peak had about 300 people, maybe 250. And you could kind of tell based on the amount of people that they get out at the rallies, as well as some things that, other researchers have revealed. There's such a burnout and just they churn through members that it's hard to pinpoint the growth of the organization.
Well, one thing I've heard about some of these folks is that they get a lot of people who have drug problems. Mm-hmm. I've heard, and which is interesting because they have a lot of anti-drug messaging, right? So you get a lot of people, right? So maybe somebody who's really battling with drugs, hard drugs, for instance, sees this and is like, yeah, I'm going to get the poison out of my veins and Patriot Front. But then, with drug use, there can be other mental health issues attached with it. You have a lot of people who have mental health issues, or maybe they have a propensity for violence and things like that. A lot of people who probably would benefit from some psychoanalysis, really, because but that's fairly obvious, I think, when you're joining a white power group to begin with, but that's just my personal opinion. Yeah, and it must be very difficult to maintain, because then you have any one person you bring into the fold has the potential to dox all these different people or leak all kinds of information. It must be extremely difficult, right?
I have heard from, again, the handful of former people and people and then another handful of people who have been close to the organization outside of the white power movement. They have told me that it's just there's such high turnover in the group because people start either getting tired of these boring tactics of, I'm posting flyers, I need something more, or it's getting tired of the cult around Thomas Rousseau, which is, you're either with that or you're against that. And once the cult of Thomas Rousseau realizes you're against that, you're out or you're basically shunned to the side. So that's just, it's hard for Patriot Front to grow for that reason as well. And it's, surprising that, oh, wow, there's a cult within a fascist group. I don't know exactly what they were expecting. In terms of how the group is organized, I think it's important to really clarify how this group is organized, because it's intentionally organized into what Thomas Rousseau calls networks. And these networks cross state lines, which is crucial for prosecution, right? Which is crucial for any civil case against this group, because 9 times out of 10, when Patriot Front comes into your town, or 9 times out of 10, if they're rallying in your community or posting whatever, they're crossing state lines to do that. And when there's statutes that we have federally that which were used in the Unite the Right rally, right? That, if you cross state lines with the intention to harm or to intimidate, Black folks, migrants, or people generally for their immutable characteristics, you cannot do that. And you can be held liable for that. And how Patriot Front has organized itself under Thomas Rousseau's leadership, it's kind of mind-boggling in a way, because they set themselves up to be sued because most of their members need to cross state lines in order to do their activism. A lot of groups will break down by states to kind of avoid that, but to create these networks, it's an interesting way to organize a group. But nonetheless, Patriot Front is organized into more than 10 so-called networks. These networks are then operated by what are called network directors. I look at them as chapter leaders. These network directors, their job is basically to coordinate for Thomas Rousseau the activities of that network. And those activities can include the circulation of racist propaganda. So making sure you're hitting your quota of racist propaganda each month. There's network directors who will oversee that. They're also, interestingly and kind of humorously, network directors oversee the diets and exercise regimen of Patriot Front members. And that's an expectation when you join the group, or when you're led into the group, when you're vetted and all that. Particularly if you come with a body size that they don't find acceptable, you are put into a very rigid diet and program, as well as an exercise program. And that's overseen by the network director. And if you're a member and you're not adhering to it, you can be reprimanded.
So it's like white genocide fat camp.
Basically. I think that's going to be the name of my book about Patriot Front.
Going back to kind of how it's organized, I think that's kind of a smart observation in terms of just the way that they're organized makes them potentially more legally vulnerable. People are getting arrested. What they're doing, it's very petty crime, vandalism, disruptive protests. Like, you're not supposed to hang banners off the highway and stuff, right? But even as members are getting picked out here and there to face legal consequences, the group just doesn't seem to it just kind of doesn't seem to faze the group much, which is interesting to me because, as we talked about earlier, I mean, the reason Patriot Front exists was kind of attempting to, jet out from the scene after Unite the Right. I just assumed to try to avoid some consequences or whatever, right? But they don't really seem that concerned about it. Am I reading that correctly?
I think you are reading that very correctly when you talk about just kind of the lack of accountability within the larger far right, or narrowing it down to the white power movement or Patriot Front. It was just a lack of accountability across the board. And Mike German, J.M. Berger, Chris Goldsmith, they are three researchers, just brilliant at what they do, and they can inform folks about this topic on why has the far right escaped accountability much more thoroughly than I can. But I can, from paraphrasing some of their work, why isn't the FBI? The FBI just never seems to have cared about. And this is also, I forgot her name, but she's writing the book "Bring the War Home." Kathleen Belew, I believe. So the FBI essentially just kind of abdicated the space of holding white supremacists or organized white supremacists accountable. And there's not any law enforcement out there that's collecting information about these groups. So prosecutors are kind of bound in that ignorance because there's no information that anybody is collecting within the criminal justice system itself. Most of the information that we know about the white power movement, going back to its infancy in the 1970s, up till today in Patriot Front, most of that information comes from, people who have turned and kind of changed their life, their former members telling us how it works, or it's infiltrators, or it's family members of these guys who are telling us information about the group. So just this abdication of just knowing about the white power movement is a problem among prosecutors. And there's this just general lack of effort. I think there's somebody shooting off fireworks outside of my apartment, and it's distracting. So
that's okay.
It sounds like you're being shot at, which adds a little bit of drama.
I do live in
it.
Chicago, but no, it's that's a bad joke about Chicago. I'm sorry. So what I wanted to say though is that there's this knowledge gap that prosecutors have because they're not collecting information, but that's really based on the non-prioritization that prosecutors and law enforcement are, people who are supposed to uphold criminal justice in our country. They just don't see the white power movement as a priority. And that leads to them making haphazard cases against Patriot or against members of groups and not bringing in the group itself, right? So people within white power groups, they might get charged here and there, but prosecutors have a real tough time bringing in the whole group, and they have an even tougher time kind of laying out a conspiracy in some of the RICO statutes that exist in our country. So it stems though from this lack of prioritization and this lack of knowledge. We could also think about FBI's, or just the history of our country. It's who is it? What is the FBI supposed to be doing? It's supposed to be protecting property. It's supposed to be protecting the capitalists. This is me as a communist guy. So, but it's supposed to be protecting wealth, right? It's not supposed to be protecting communities against white supremacists. That's the FBI. But something that Chris Goldsmith brings up in his, he leads a group called Task Force Butler, and they developed this really fascinating, important, very interesting report about how prosecutors can criminally charge Patriot Front. He also does this with another group that used to operate in New England, but the one on Patriot Front suggests that how do we get across? How do we get this across the criminal justice, the institution of criminal justice, the lawyers, the cops? How do we get it across that white supremacists are a problem? Well, we need to start treating them as a criminal group. And if you think about how Patriot Front targeted, especially with the destruction of these memorials that celebrate, the life of Black folks who have been killed by police, or symbols of LGBTQ pride, right? They're intentionally going out there and Patriot Front members are intentionally going out there and destroying these symbols and going into communities, crossing state lines, and we can show coordination and intention. Those are criminal acts, and thinking of the group as a criminal enterprise could help kind of shift the criminal justice system as a whole and make it, at least ideally, it could push them to hold groups like Patriot Front to account, like they have used similar laws against the left groups and the mob.
Yeah. So undeterred, Patriot Front during the Biden years just continues to get active. And again, a lot of questions here, right? Biden's in charge. A lot of extremist movements kind of go into, I don't want to say full-blown hibernation, but they kind of hit the brakes for a second after the Capitol riot, rethink their strategies, rethink sort of what they want to be doing. But Patriot Front is just cruising along. They are vandalizing, defacing murals of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, George Floyd, Martin Luther King Jr., Arthur Ashe. They are targeting historically Black colleges and universities. They've got rallies in Salt Lake City, Pittsburgh, DC, Indy, Youngstown, Austin. I mean, they're getting around. It seems every month or two, they kind of pop out of the woodwork and they do something else. And in the meantime, they're just leaving litter, these stupid stickers and posters and banners all over the place. I thought maybe a way to wrap the show up here, just being conscious of time and wanting to respect your time, Jeff, too. I thought maybe modern day Patriot Front. So I'm saying 2021 to today. Let's go with that window. Is there an event that comes to mind or like something Patriot Front has done in that window, in sort of, let's say, the last 5 years, that says something to you about what the group is today? Mike.
Yeah. So I'm doing some reporting now, writing a magazine feature about Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where there's a big problem with right-wing extremists. And in June of 2022, a bunch of Patriot Front guys hopped into U-Hauls to go over to the park there, which is, by the way, beautiful. Having been there, I went to Pride this year in Coeur d'Alene. It was so cool. I loved it. What a beautiful lake. And they pull up at this thing, and you got to understand, any kind of place like this where it's like a red state in a reactionary place, pride is really important. And not only that, it's very tender, right? Like, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, Jared. It's like, I mean, it's for people who's like coming out in places like this is not as easy as coming out in Brooklyn, right? So they come in, they're going to go and they've decided they're going to go terrorize folks there. At the same time, they're sort of responding to a bunch of hype from libs of TikTok, aka Chaya Rychek, who has fixated on a few things promoting this Pride event. And no sooner do they get out of the U-Hauls, but they're arrested because for any kind of Pride event in a place like Coeur d'Alene, there's going to be more cops than people, pretty much. And I don't know, not really more cops than people, but I mean, it was when I went this year, it was just flanked with police. Like there was just police on all sides to sort of keep people from mixing it up between protesters and Pride goers. And they were shut down within a second. They hopped out of the U-Haul, and next thing you know, they were all sitting, their arms bound behind their backs. And that to me is Patriot Front, right? They think that they're going to come in, kind of, be greeted as liberators in a place like this, and be loved. But ultimately, they set the group back, and everybody in the group winds up with a police record of some kind, if they didn't have one already. They end up looking like assholes, I think, even to the very kind of Republican people they want to recruit. Because even if the rhetoric around Pride is very negative from the MAGA right, and it's very negative, they don't like the idea of being perceived as terrorists. And whether this is terrorism or not likely, by any kind of legal definition. But they were definitely trying to scare the shit out of those people, and it ended up looking really, really grim.
Jeff, what's something that has happened in Patriot Front in the last 4 or 5 years that kind of tells listeners something they should know about the group?
That's hard because there's so much. However, can I say two things? One's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Something that we all should remember about Patriot Front is that it leaks like a sieve. There's so many disaffected members who have now gone through Patriot Front that are out in the world or on Telegram, just bad-mouthing the organization, sharing documents that they took from the organization when they were in. Right? These are not like good people, right? These are still like white supremacists, but they're sharing information about Patriot Front. And then, of course, not to mention the work of anti-fascist infiltrators who have been able to get into the organization, get into the good graces of leadership within the organization, and then take what information that they've been given from these leaders and share it with journalists. And that has happened, from what I know, at least 5 times, though people, some journalists out there have told me it has happened more than 10 times. So Patriot Front being infiltrated over and over and over again just shows us, one, wow, this group just doesn't have any understanding of what OPSEC or vetting is, right? It's funny in a way. And two, it shows us that Patriot Front is desperate for people, right? I mean, it shows us that they're really kind of, fishing at the bottom of the barrel, right? Like anybody who shows interest in them, they'll say, oh, come on, come in. We'll do some light vetting and now you're part of us. So it's a group that leaks like a sieve, and going forward, I think that's going to be their undoing. Something else that I want to say here is the group does not give a fuck about its members. It does not particularly give a fuck about the public safety, right? But it doesn't, Patriot Front, Thomas Rousseau, he doesn't give a fuck about the members of Patriot Front. He sees them as pawns in his game. I've heard this from multiple people who have been inside the group. I've heard this from infiltrators that I've interviewed. And I've just looking at the communication that we've gained from inside the organization, you see Thomas Rousseau just treating people like dirt, like less than. And these are people who look up to Thomas Rousseau, who brown nose Thomas Rousseau, that he's treating like dirt. So, an example of like a really crystal clear example, and Mike alluded to this, is how they do not give a shit about their members. They pack 30 dudes in the back of a U-Haul. How is that safe? One, it's also, you can't do that. Technically, there's municipalities could enforce traffic laws there and pull them over and then confiscate the vehicle. That's something law enforcement can do. That's very easy to stop this. And this is what we saw at Coeur d'Alene. But, so Thomas Rousseau doesn't give a shit about his people. He's packing them in like sardines. There's this great quote from Nathan Brenner. His alias is Ben Colorado. And in one of the leaks, we get all these text messages and private communication. And here's Nathan Brenner talking to Thomas Rousseau in a private message about his experience in the back of a U-Haul truck. And this was a back of the U-Haul truck going into DC in December of 2021. Nathan Brenner writes to Thomas, I noticed some people throwing up after exiting the box truck. Nathan Brenner continues, quote, I may take my guys to a sauna to try and get them accustomed to heat and humidity for sustained periods of time. And many of the people are under the impression they will suffocate in the truck, end quote. I'll stop there. But so that's Nathan Brenner, who is a leader within Patriot Front. He's one of the network directors, noticing the behavior of his guys in the back of the U-Haul and then not being comfortable enough to say, hey, Thomas, why don't we figure it out a different way, right? It kind of also shows the stranglehold that Thomas has on this organization, which I also think is going to be Patriot Front's undoing, because Thomas Rousseau doesn't have strategy. He might have a good charisma for some folks, but it's this lack of respect that he has for human beings that's going to be also part of Patriot Front's undoing.
Yeah, because it seems like he outlined this vision of Patriot Front as a teenager and just didn't seem to take it a lot further than that.
Right.
It seems to be like his public communications firm is like, and people get picked off and arrested. It brings in all kinds of just like, dangerous people, frankly. I mean, but I was
going to say that it seemed, it doesn't matter whether they're feds or not, really, right? Because they're doing the same purpose of if they were feds, right? Like they're discrediting the white power movement and they're discrediting MAGA and making them look foolish. I mean, imagine coming out of a box truck and just hurling when you're trying to come out there and intimidate people. It's actually fucking hilarious. Right. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not exactly feeling bad for the like nauseous riders of the truck. I mean, I take your point, and you're not asking me to, I know, but I take your point that he's not treating them well, but it's also fucking hilarious. Just imagine like, all right, Coeur d'Alene, let's go. And then you just like barf all over a fucking drag queen's shoes when you're trying to like intimidate people. Yeah, I mean, they're not feds, but they're serving the same fucking purpose that the feds would. Like, that's exactly what the feds would do to discredit the white power movement.
I would, and that starts at the top, this lack of care, right, that Thomas has for his own people. But you also see that translate down the chain as well. I wrote a story with Jason Wilson, great journalist. Follow him. He's really good at what he does in uncovering aspects of far-right activity. But we wrote a story that kind of shows just the bumbling nature of these guys, right? It's two young men on an overpass, hanging a banner over the Interstate 35 in Dallas. And they're using flares to try to like look cool and to take photos. And then the flares catch the banner on fire. And it's basically like from, what the police report says and some of the video, body cam video, it's just kind of like Benny Hill, like hilarity. It's like just these two young guys just kind of like running around, not knowing what to do. The banner ends up dropping onto the interstate on fire, and they had to close down Interstate 35 for a time. And, that's just to emphasize the lack of concern that these young men have for communities that supposedly they want to recruit from. And it's just a lack of concern, again, for people. And it's going to be their undoing.
The event that sticks out to me is May 2023. So Patriot Front has done a handful of rallies in Washington, D.C. now. Seems to always be on the National Mall. They want the theatrics of it, right? These have been some of their biggest, single event gatherings, right? This is where, all hands on deck, come to DC because Thomas has got to film, some new thirst trap videos, rambling about the globalists or Jews or whatever the hell he is on that month. But this May 2023 rally sticks out because when they show up, it is, again, a flash rally, unannounced. Boom. What do you know? They're just there. The police are scrambling to try to figure out what is happening and keep people away from them, keep them away from people too. They've got their masks on, their uniforms, they're marching around, chanting, whatever. And they just get heckled there. They just get called losers, and this is also, to me, this was the one that stuck out as this is when the MAGA movement, really the big social media stars of the MAGA movement, just went full bore on these people are federal agents thing. And that swirled around a little bit. What I'm saying is cat turd had fallen at that point. The cat turds of the world were these people are federal agents and they're here to trap you and make us look bad. We would never barf in a U-Haul. To be clear, that is for the people we don't like. So to me, that kind of, I think what that says to me about Patriot Front today is they want so bad to seem vicious. And, we talked about, as we went through some of this early timeline, it's not a harmless group. I want to be clear about that, but they are a bunch of doofuses, right? And it's the group seems almost laser beam focused on optics and somehow thinks that if they present the right image of their group specifically, and more specifically of Thomas Rousseau, something America is saved. Does that feel right to you? I mean, I don't want to miss something critical here.
I think that's right on. I mean, you hit at really what the organization's aura is, or their vibe, I guess. And it's speaking of, I just want to name drop one more person because it's him who really took the cake with heckling Patriot Front in May of 2023. He got on, some of this clip just went so far. Rachel Maddow talked about it. A bunch of other commentary folk talked about it. But Joe Flood was on a red city bike. I think they're called city bikes in Washington, D.C., right? The Capitol bike share, the red bike thing. So my man, Joe Flood, basically just gets on his bike share, whatever it's Capitol bike share, and follows Patriot Front throughout their march on D.C. And he's just heckling them about their dress and what they're saying. And it's hilarious. If you Google Joe Flood, Washington, D.C., Patriot Front, you'll find the clips, and it's worth your time.
We do not stand firm in the way of tyranny now. There will be no memory of America to continue. No history to fight for.
You were the losers of your high school class.
We have gone out into this once great country and found its people wanting. Americans, real Americans, are cast adrift and crushed underfoot.
You all got different types of pants on.
The cities have turned.
What I've learned today is that Patriot Front is unquestionably the most prominent white power group in the country. And at the same time has been kind of stuck in one place for nearly a decade.
It doesn't seem
right?
like anybody wants them to exist except them.
Yeah, but what does that say about the white power movement in general? It's all been infused into MAGA. And that is really what has happened, I think. I mean, that's, bottom text. That's my read on this. It's just that's the biggest, there used to be a bunch of them, right, in Charlottesville. And they've really it really shrunk. There are neo-Nazi accelerationist groups. There's a few, Adam Waffen Division came and went after a few murders. But Patriot Front is really they're, if you like this genre, they're the Beatles of it. And And yet at the same time, they're going absolutely nowhere. They're going nowhere at all.
You know, if I heard Patriot Front was going to be somewhere, like if I thought they were going to be in Chicago and I like went to go like see their rally in Chicago, it would give me the same vibe as like going to see Gene Simmons, where it's just like, yeah, they were like, that guy was like in a band that was good a while ago, right? Right. It's, you're like trying to like explain to your friend who like also got comped tickets at the casino to see Gene Simmons, like what the deal is.
Yeah, it's actually, like my big question I think from this is sort of like why are they still doing it? Like, why are you still doing it? It's MAGA is where all the energy is. Why bother go through all this? But yet, nevertheless, we're doing this, and we've made this podcast, and we will definitely have to promote it later on this summer when they end up showing up some random place, Tulsa, Oklahoma, someplace you don't know yet, and just march around with their masks and looking ridiculous.
Yeah, because I feel like Patriot Front is not like super understood. I mean, that's like the impetus of the episode today, right? I mean, Jeff, maybe the last question here and we'll let you go. In terms of like media coverage, mainstream media coverage, local news coverage, like when Patriot Front rolls up to town, do you feel like most news consumers are like getting a good understanding of what this group is? I'm just, you have like people that scream that they're feds. You have people that act like they are, the Third Reich raised from the grave, ready to come kill them all. But like, I don't know. How do you feel? Do you think that the public really kind of understands what this group is?
I do not think so, just based on what I see of commentary online. And I think this is just maybe how large audiences or large populations think. A lot of people will call Patriot Front Proud Boys, or anybody in the far right, because Proud Boys as a label has gotten such attention. Right. So like talking with like my family members who are somewhat, news consumers, but they're not like super glued into it like we are. They'll just say, oh, the Proud Boys. I'm like, oh, actually, they're Patriot Front and this is what they do. And this is how they're different. But I mean, for all practical purposes, I mean, yes, there's some ideological differences. There's some strategic differences. Proud Boys are much more openly violent, for example. But behind their covers, behind their dumb little masks, the people that are in Patriot Front some of them are felons. Some of them have domestic assault charges on their record, right? Some of them are drug addicts. Some of them have committed a litany of felonies that are, from my read of it, would be more crimes of poverty. So like theft and stuff like that, fraud, using checks, passing bad checks. So they're members that are, the people that Patriot Front has around it, they are violent. Whether the group wants to admit that the group is itself violent, that's a different thing, but members within the group are violent. And, that could lead, and what we saw in Boston in July 22, that's a recipe for disaster when you get, these violent-minded men together chanting white supremacist bullshit. And then all of a sudden, they're going to be confronted by a man like Charles Morrell, who's a Black artist and musician in Boston. He was on his lunch break. He gives Patriot Front his business, right? He's like, says things to them. And what does Patriot Front do? They react. They escalate the situation. They pin him against the light post, right? And then just kind of jam him into the light post. He sued successfully. Patriot Front never showed up to court. So the judge defaulted against Patriot Front and awarded Charles Morrell $2.75 million. And, where does Patriot Front go? Right? They're getting sued. Their membership is plateauing. They're on the same stuff since 2016, since this teenager came and created it. But at the same time, they're the most active. And at the same time, they're the ones that are causing, like when we see the news about white supremacist groups and communities, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be Patriot Front.
We cover a lot of groups and people like exist in the Patriot Front universe on this show. And, a theme is just that a lot of these people or groups or movements themselves are just full of contradictions, right? I think that's part of what makes them the way they are. Jeff, we've had you long enough. What a brain dump. about Patriot Front. Thanks for joining the show this week. Where can people keep up with you and your work?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It was a blast. I could talk about Patriot Front, unfortunately, for a lot longer. If you want to do a part 2. However, yeah, if you want to look at my work into the white power movement, catch me on Blue Sky. My name, Jeff Tischauser, at Blue Sky.
I just want to say Jeff rocks. I've worked with him. He's one of the best guys. He's just
cool
a great guy. And thanks, also, Mike. I love you. A question. I have more things to say about Patriot Front. I was going to ask, are they the last white power group? But because is it all the Republican Party going forward? But I'm going to throw that aside to say that. How are you feeling about your fantasy football team this year? For people who don't know, both Jared and Jeff are in a fantasy football league I've been running for the last 4 years or so, 5 years.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
That features
I think it was a
number
thing,
of prominent journalists who cover the right. And it's an eclectic crew. You got Parker Malloy. There's a bunch of people. Ben Collins. Anyway,
Claire was in it too, right? Like last year, she beat me.
Oh, Claire was it? That's right. Claire was in it last year. That's true.
Great team names. Anti-fascist play action. What was mine this year? LBs of TikTok was one.
LBs of TikTok was the best, like linebackers of TikTok. Anyway, but yeah, how are you feeling about your team this year?
I go in.
You going to turn it around?
Look, I'm a Bears fan, all right? So every year there's a possibility.
Right? He knows pain. This man knows pain is what he's telling you.
Particularly this year, I'm going in strong. Caleb Williams is going good. And I'm going to take that energy into my fantasy football draft and run shit.
We love to see it. I would say I'm a Jets fan, so you need to give me a primer on a separate podcast about Justin Fields, because I don't know what I'm getting myself into yet. So it seems exciting. We've never
Justin
had a quarterback
who
runs. Yeah, we've nice to have also a black quarterback on the Jets. That's nice. We haven't had that for a minute.
You guys are going to do good. You guys have a great wide receiver crew. You guys got that great running back.
Right on. All right.
Yeah.
I will once again be letting the algorithm pick my fantasy football team.
It gives you your best shot, to be honest.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll throw a link to Jeff's Blue Sky profile, some of his reporting that we talked about on the show today, down in the description. Jeff is cool. He's good people. Go check out his work. Follow him up. And I think that's going to do it for us here this week.
And if you wanted to hit that tip jar, it's in the episode description.
We'll be off next week, but back on July 14th. Catch you then.